Breaking news from around your world on this Tuesday, February 26, 2019. I'm Larry Rice. President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong Un arrived in Vietnam Tuesday for their second summit in less than a year, at which the U.S. side will urge tangible steps by North Korea to dismantle its nuclear weapons program. Trump told reporters he's expecting a very tremendous summit aimed at delivering on promises to get North Korea to agree to concrete steps toward giving up its nuclear weapons. Kim arrived to a red carpet reception Tuesday after a 65-hour, 2,500-mile ride on an armored train that traveled from Pyongyang through China. He was greeted by Vietnamese officials and waved to a crowd of people carrying Vietnamese and North Korean flags. The two leaders will meet for a brief one-on-one conversation on Wednesday evening, followed by a dinner at which they will each be accompanied by two guests and interpreters. White House spokeswoman Sarah Sanders told reporters the two will meet again on Thursday. Their talks come 8 months after their historic summit in Singapore, the first between a sitting U.S. president and a North Korean leader. India launched an airstrike on Pakistan's side of the disputed Kashmir region early Tuesday, the latest escalation of tensions since a suicide bombing that killed more than 40 Indian soldiers in that region earlier this month. India said the airstrike targeted a terrorist training camp operated by the Pakistan-based militant group Jaish-e-Mohammed, which claimed responsibility for the suicide bombing, and that Indian Mirage 2000 fighter jets had killed a very large number of militants. Pakistan's military said India's jets, facing a response by Pakistan's Air Force, dropped their payloads in haste, hitting a forested area, and that no casualties or damage were reported. A jury in Melbourne has found Cardinal George Pell, Australia's most senior Catholic and the Vatican's economy minister, guilty of sexually abusing two 13-year-old choir boys shortly after celebrating Mass in 1996. The 77-year-old Pell was also found guilty of indecently assaulting one of the teens a month later. The jury reached its decision December 11th, but the court had forbidden publication about details in that trial until Tuesday. Pell is the most senior Catholic Church official to be convicted of sexual abuse. He faces up to 50 years in prison, with a sentencing hearing scheduled for Wednesday. He filed an appeal against the convictions last week. Vice President Mike Pence announced an additional $56 million in humanitarian aid for Venezuelans during a visit to neighboring Colombia to reaffirm the United States' support for Venezuelan opposition leader and internationally recognized interim president Juan Guaido. Pence also announced new sanctions against President Nicolas Maduro and officials in his embattled government. Pence urged regional leaders to freeze the Venezuelan state oil company's assets and to transfer Maduro's assets to Guaido. Pence's visit with Guaido in Colombia's capital of Bogota came after a standoff at the Colombia-Venezuela border turned violent when Venezuelan security forces enforced Maduro's blockade against foreign aid the opposition is trying to get into that South American nation. U.S. senators called drug pricing practices morally repugnant and told drug company executives they do not want to hear them blame others for the high prices, taking an aggressive stance at a Senate hearing on the rising cost of prescription medicine. Senators took aim in particular at AbbVie's chief executive, Richard Gonzalez, and his company's rheumatoid arthritis drug, Humira, the world's top-selling prescription medicine. Executives from other drug companies also answered questions from members of the U.S. Senate Finance Committee. The drug executives pointed to their company's records of developing life-saving medications, saying profits generated in the lucrative U.S. market helped them fund expensive research and development of future treatments. President Trump has said drug makers are getting away with murder, and his administration has made bringing down prescription medicine costs for U.S. consumers a top priority. A U.S. appeals court upheld a district court's ruling that AT&T's acquisition of Time Warner is legal. On Tuesday, the three-judge panel from the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals affirmed the lower court's decision that the government's antitrust objections were unpersuasive. The ruling brings the merger closer to completion, despite AT&T's dispute with antitrust regulators since the deal was announced in October of 2016. The Justice Department could still ask for a full appeals court to hear the case or appeal the ruling to the Supreme Court. The U.S. Department of Justice brought the suit challenging telecom giant AT&T's $85.4 billion acquisition of Time Warner in November of 2017, arguing that it would restrict pay TV competition. AT&T shares rose to trade roughly 0.5% higher following the appeals court decision Tuesday. Since the acquisition, Time Warner has been renamed Warner Media. An Amtrak train stuck in the Oregon snow since Sunday got moving again Tuesday after nearly 200 passengers waited for more than 36 hours. Union Pacific, which owns the rail the Amtrak Coast Starlight uses, said a locomotive began pulling the train from its location in Oak Ridge, Oregon, to Eugene early Tuesday. The Coast Starlight was traveling from Seattle to Los Angeles when it hit a tree in Oak Ridge Sunday evening. An Amtrak spokeswoman said 183 passengers were stranded on board the train. Oak Ridge, about 45 miles southeast of Eugene, was hit with more than 10 inches of snow Monday afternoon, which slowed aid efforts. A Union Pacific spokesman said the company decided to keep the passengers on the train because of power outages and a lack of hotel space in nearby towns. Road closures and fallen trees due to the snow made it impossible to transport the passengers by bus. The U.S. military disrupted the internet access of a Russian troll farm accused of trying to influence American voters on November 6, 2018, the day of the midterm congressional elections. The U.S. Cyber Command strike targeted the Internet Research Agency in the Russian port city of St. Petersburg, according to the Washington Post, citing unidentified U.S. officials. The group is a Kremlin-backed outfit whose employees had posed as Americans and spread disinformation online in an attempt to influence the 2016 election as well. The Pentagon's Cyber Warfare Unit, which works closely with the National Security Agency, had no comment on the report. Cyber Command's offensive operations are highly classified and rarely made public. The Internet Research Agency was one of 3 entities and 13 Russian individuals indicted by Special Counsel Robert Mueller's office in February 2018 in an alleged criminal and espionage conspiracy to tamper in the U.S. presidential race. And that's your update for this Tuesday, February 26th, 2019. I'm Larry Rice. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.